Hello, my name is KAWEKWA Douglas and welcome to the GMWS 2025. First and forward, I would like to start with the first things. Mr. Henry Ruyomba, Sevo, webaye guno omulimu, webaye by'okola, era kimanyi bingi tugenda kukola PMB, so asajja kava kawangale. Get you. So I was just saying thank you to Mr. Henry Ruyomba. So I'm going to talk about leveraging AI and teletherapy to prevent substance misuse under climate stress. But however, I would just like to start with the basics. What is AI? Basically, any software that is used to replace product outputs that requires human intelligence. And this is very important because of the discussion of this topic that actually I'm discussing. And what is teletherapy? This is basically e-therapy, online counseling, or cyber counseling. It's basically a provision of mental health services over the phone or online, right? And climate stress, which is also climate anxiety or climate distress, is basically negative emotions or thoughts that we experience due to changes in climate change, right? And lastly, substance misuse, right? Substance misuse is basically the use of psychoanalytic drugs, substances that actually impact our health negatively. And this comes from substance use, which is the consumption of alcohol, drugs, whether they're prescribed medication, illicit drugs, or over-the-counter drugs that actually lead to substance misuse and impact our physical or mental health. And people always get curious about prescribed drugs. How can you misuse prescribed drugs? I'll give an example. Last week, actually, a week ago, a young girl actually almost committed suicide taking overdose with her medication. So in my context, most people don't think that it's possible. They only think about as you're going to discuss, the extreme, the alcohol, the weed, etc., and all that. But that's the concept of it. So my discussion is about leveraging AI and teletherapy to prevent substance misuse using under climate stress. But however, I would like to talk about myself. Who am I? I'm doing my master's in counseling psychology at MOOC. I'm a practicing structure engineer. I'm the founder of MindLyfe, a teletherapy and mental health organization, transforming mental health access and support to people on the continent. I'm trained in perinatal mental health care with postpartum support international in the USA, as well as I'm trained in trauma and mental health informed schools and communities from trauma informed schools in the UK. And I've also recently, last month, I'm the Uganda and youth mental health representative on the East, Central, and Southern Africa health community, right? So I represent the young people in this region about mental health. And as I shared recently about MindLyfe, basically we are addressing mental stigma and access to support using technology. And we are doing that. We've worked with different organizations, public, private, Uganda Prison Service, the Uganda Prison Force, Uganda Police Force, and as well as others, right? Complete organizations. But how are we doing this work as MindLyfe? This is what we discuss about the MindLyfe way. So the first pillar is activate with MindLyfe. And here we are addressing mental stigma and building help-seeking behavior through mental health awareness, mental health advocacy activities, right? And from this first arm, we go to engage with MindLyfe. And engage with MindLyfe, we're basically building mental health communities. We're building MindLyfe chapters in universities, mental health clubs in secondary schools, and subspaces at the workplace. And finally, we bring support and enable people to get support wherever they are at any time from anywhere. And that's why the teletherapy MindLyfe comes in, the web and mobile application that people create on accounts with it and be able to be matched with professional therapists to have professional therapy remotely, whether in person or virtually, audio, video chat, right? So, yes, that's about me and about MindLyfe. So let's get into our discussion today. Substance use statistics. As you see on this picture on the left, the regions in Africa that actually, most Africa at 55% is the region on Africa that actually has the most use of illicit drugs. However, other regions, as you see, East Africa is at 19% where I'm actually at. But yeah, on the right, you see the rate of death per 100,000 people as per 2021 in the different regions: North America, South Africa, Southern Africa, Southern America, North America, China, Russia, and Australia. You see those regions like the death 50 plus. So this is to give you a concept of how this is such a problem. And this is because globally, 269 million people worldwide actually used drugs in 2018 as per statistics. And 35 million people are suffering from drug use disorders as referenced by Ken in that paper, right? And 400 million people globally are affected by alcohol use disorders. To put this in context, 2023, over 24 or 64 million Africans were actually suffering from mental disorders, right? Challenges. So this is basically 400 million people who was actually affected by alcohol use disorders is equivalent to how the number of mental health patients or mental health people who needed mental health support in Africa as per 2023. So in sub-Saharan Africa, here we're actually mainly looking at the adolescents and as well as the adults. You see, like the 12-month prevalence of substance use has been at 18% in sub-Saharan Africa. And if you look at it in Botswana, it goes up to 32%, and in West Africa as low as 4%. So there's a variation depending on the country. But however, if you look further, the alcohol use among adults, you see the rates at 50% in Rwanda and 30% in Uganda. So adults who have used alcohol as per in their lifetime, almost in their lifetime, these are what it's actually trying to show us, right? So why is this important? This is one, to understand that substance use is widespread and growing globally in Africa, all over the country, especially in Africa, especially in the youth. In Uganda, 70% of the 46 million people are youth. So this is a very huge question. It's a crisis already in schools, communities, everywhere. And then secondly, alcohol and cannabis remain dominant. These are most substance disorders actually used that actually are happening. But however, there's so much more, so many, every time almost, so much is there. And lastly, this is important because it shows that the rising need of drug misuse corresponds to the limited infrastructure, treatment infrastructure. And this is why technology-based or scalable technology-based interventions are key, like teletherapy, which is the work I'm doing at MindLyfe, right? So getting back further into our presentation, you would wonder, how does heat predict or correlate with substance use, right? In lay terms, if it's a hot day, you'd like to take a cold bottle of water to basically calm your body up, calm yourself up. So it's the same thing like with hot days, with heated days, you are actually affected psychologically. It affects your behavior, it affects your thinking, it affects how you look at yourself. And this can actually lead into substance use. I'll give you an example. I was reading somewhere like in the USA in 1998 July, there were over 1.56 million cases, murder case, rape, assaults, and armed robberies that came up due to the effect of the high, because in July 1988, they recorded the highest warmer records, right? Summer records, rather. So there was a correlation between the heat, the high temperatures, and the cases that actually happened. So it's the same thing even here, that when there are these cases that have been done by Columbia University in New York and California, it shows like increase in the temperatures actually has led to increase in substance use, right? These are the papers that you see here. So what does this mean for us? Like heat waves are a predictable trigger for misuse spikes. If we know when and where they hit, we can actually act preemptively. So basically prevention, and this is a gist of actually the core of the work we're doing, prevention care, preventative care. So on the right, you see the graph is basically just to show you, depending on the age brackets and the years, the emergency visits are actually done when there are high cases of heat and people using substance use, right? So then from that, understanding the statistics, understanding like actually that heat actually can lead to substance use. So how does teletherapy actually be able to be used to address this challenge, right? So this is what you're looking at, like the AI-driven risk stratification, that on an AI platform, a teletherapy platform, which is using AI, assisted therapy, and all these other mechanisms, you can actually incorporate machine learning models, like you see SuperLearner, these studies that were done here, they've already been done here, so it's already been tested. SuperLearner, XGBoost, RIF, that can actually be used to predict substance use disorders, substance use relapse, as well as adherence, right? And what you see here on the whatever, the AUC is basically the area under the curve, basically on the graph, during the studies, it shows like 0.8 shows that it's an excellent predictor, and it's justifiable to show that these models can actually be used to predict substance use, adherence, or relapse. And how do you get to this point? It's really like the feature set that we'll be having. Someone can actually self-analyze themselves, and they say like, actually, I'm feeling stressed, right? I'm feeling like I want to go use my drugs. I want to abuse my drugs, right? The temperature, the geotag, or the geographical locations can actually, let's say in an example that I'm in Canada, I'm in Uganda. If I get the temperatures through MindLyfe platform, recorded into my account, it can actually gauge me and guide me that actually, oh, the temperatures are high, see me have this he might have these preventions, right? These these proactive measures that you can actually do not to maybe relapse or to keep adhering to your treatment plan, right? So the same thing with the usage patterns also, session drops and logins. So why is this important? It's just like these lightweight machine models, right, can be actually used to predict substance use adherence, and this can actually show what are the risk tiers, right? And this is where it goes in, like, what if we understand with those indicators from the machine models and shows us the risk tiers. So what do you do? What can you do? How does teletherapy or teletherapy platforms can actually, what can they do remotely on my phone? So this is what it shows you here, like the intervention. When my risk tier is low, basically a daily tip of, oh, you should take water 60 seconds, right? Every after a minute or at this time, right? Those like the push notifications like you would get if you're watching TikTok or on WhatsApp. So basically the same thing here. If I'm medium, I can have the in-app CBT is basically cognitive behavioral therapy. So modules, right? To challenge my thought process, to make myself. We know from research that most people actually addicted or using substances are using this as a replacement to get pleasure from something else they don't want to face. So if I'm feeling like I should use these drugs, then I get a model or an activity to be done on platform. It's going to take my intention away, and then I focus on that, and that will actually make me keep adhering to my treatment. So as well as a high, it can get you to then have actually a consultation there and then immediately, same video day. So this is important because the tiered micro interventions keep people engaged and catch phrasing distress early without overwhelming the clinical team. So basically, through teletherapy, we are able to prevent and actually engage someone who's actually may go to a critical case of maybe substance overuse. So basically, you're helping the clinical team, the clinicians, the counselors, the psychotherapists, or social workers who may not be able to get these crisis cases, so that you can actually be able to be in shape. So adaptive content and alerts. This is basically talking about the notification I was talking about earlier, that at 32 degrees, I can actually get a notification to drink 200 milliliters of water, right, every hour, so that I can actually gauge my psychological being and myself daily, or a 2-minute breathing break in a cool corner. If, like I said, I'm in Uganda, it's hot here, and I get a notification you need to cool down, I go get into a shade, right, and I reset my body, I reset myself, my internal state, so that I can be able to not get into substance abuse or an activity that's not going to support my well-being that I want. So like I said, the studies have been done in California, New York studies, whereby we were correlating earlier when we saw the spike in the emergency department visits and the substance use, right? So this is very important because therapy platforms like MindLyfe can directly use public health advisories or data to actually be able to notify users on the MindLyfe platform or any other therapy platform not to be able to give into substance abuse, right? So that's basically the just-in prevention that we're talking about, preventative care. So in conclusion with this, we have these key takers. One, we are able to predict that high temperatures can lead to spike or misuse, substance misuse, right? So through self-reporting or through the data that you're getting by using a therapy platform. That is, of course, when you give it consent, as well as by research, right? So then you stratify that. We know that light machine learning models can actually predict substance misuse or actual adherence, as well as behaviors, right? So then that leads to intervention, and then you can actually automate this whole system. So this is based with the therapy platform because this is directly connects with mental well-being, mental health. So that's why therapy comes in, like MindLyfe, platform like MindLyfe and any other. And then on your small scale, whether through the MindLyfe platform, you can actually be able to pilot this so that you can actually be in charge of your mental well-being, right? So I conclude by an call to action that each one of us, that with this learning and this research, you can actually be able to understand that teletherapy plays a very key role, because as we know that with the disintegrated health infrastructure, whether in the region or anywhere else, with a few mental health professionals globally, teletherapy can actually be able to bridge that gap by enabling people to actually avoid, to keep adhering to their substance treatment and not to deter from that. So there's global evidence, like from the papers I've actually shared, and rather in the references that you will see. And this shows that timely and preventative interventions will help us to gauge and curb substance misuse all over the world, whether, as you showed, that globally in the regions in Canada, North America, South America, Africa, Asia, China, and especially among the young people, like we said, because this is the biggest challenge they're having, the biggest users of substance misuse. And with that, this is a references for those who may need a further reading. This is part of the references I got when I was doing my research on this. And I conclude by calling to action, like all policymakers, mental health professionals, us as players, transforming and impacting lives of humanity through mental well-being, that we should embrace technology, AI-assisted therapy, teletherapy, to be able to support all the different categories of people, clients, wherever they are, using, so that they may be able, not only just substance misuse, but any other mental health disorder. I greet you in the name of peace, truth, and love, and everything that you've listened in. And I'm hoping that this can be able to spark us to be able to make practical interventions and support to humanity. KAWEKWA Douglas from Uganda.